everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Regressive Soapbox. So guys, you've heard me say on more than one occasion that I'm further to the left than most. I am so far to the left that there are times where I end up on the right. They are. And again, the reason I take positions is not arbitrary. I take them because I look at it as, how do you solve a particular issue? Well, I don't necessarily care what you call it at that point. I just care about solving that particular problem. Now, the thing that I agree with conservatives most on is this concept of freedom. Freedom. Absolute freedom. I am a freedom extremist. I want to be left to my own devices. If they say they want government off their back, fair enough, I agree. If they say, for the most part, they want to pursue their own ends, unencumbered by regulation or this external stuff, at least from an individual standpoint, I agree. You should be free to pursue your life in the way you want to pursue your life. To a point. Because ultimately, if you're infringing on somebody else's rights, ultimately, you can't say I want to be free even to the point of being able to subvert the will of somebody else. But at least up until the point where, what was the saying? Where the tip of that person's nose starts. My freedom should be, for the most part, I should be left to my own devices. Now, conservatives usually make this case. And they would say, I want to have the independence and the dignity of work. I want to be able to support my family, etc., etc. But they just hit upon a problem, a contradiction. I'm a freedom extremist. Now, you're telling me about work. And look, I'm not against work. You need to understand, for the most part, just as being a human being, there's certain things that we have to deal with. Food, shelter, clothing. I've called these things the natural social order. Those are the things that we need to be a self-fulfilled or self-actualized person. But in this specific case, much of the jobs that people do are worthless, at least from a societal standpoint. Ultimately, the reason you go to work, unless you're doing something like doctor, lawyer, not even lawyer, like a doctor, teacher, engineer, those type of things, things that tangibly make the society better. Ultimately, you're going to work just to go to work. The work that you're doing is purely justified just because it gives somebody else's profit. Yes, you make a wage, but that wage isn't really adding social value. That wage is purely there so you would have cash to interact with your society and cover your own expenses. And, of course, make that person rich. There is no need in society for a fry cook. Zero. The need for a fry cook comes up because an individual has to... Look, just as human beings, human frailty. If we need food, if we need water, if we need shelter, the capitalistic model can compel that particular individual to subvert itself to this menial task, this menial, repetitive task, ultimately because they're getting a particular wage. Now, right off the bat, you can kind of see the problem here. Right? If you're telling me that freedom is awesome, but then you're also telling me that you're stuck at a job for 8, 9, 10, 12 hours a day, and the job that you're stuck at, you have no control over what you're doing in that particular job, in that particular position, and when you finish, the results of your labor will stay at that job. You're being exploited, and the profits from that exploitation will flow to the top. And at any particular point, you can be discarded. But the point I'm getting at is you're spending 40 and 50 hours doing something that you have no control over. Doing something to the whims of somebody else who's over top of you. That doesn't look like freedom to me. That doesn't look like freedom at all. And to put a finer point on it, it's doing something that you don't necessarily have control over and is socially unnecessary. Meaning, it's not a situation of you saying, I'm going to be a doctor, I have a passion for being a doctor, so I'm going to practice medicine. Yes, I'm going to make some money off it, but ultimately I'm doing this because I love what I'm doing. That has a social, valuable function associated with it. We would need that in a particular society. If you're an architect, yes, we would need that in a particular society. Now, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. I'm not saying that jobs are irrelevant. That's not what I'm getting at. I'm getting at that there's a social value to certain jobs. Those jobs are crucial and important. The other jobs, not so much. Now, if I'm saying I am a freedom extremist, and I'm saying, A, we are aware of certain needs that we have as people: food, clothing, shelter, fulfillment, this idea of belonging to something, or this idea of being self-actualized. Those are just human values. Those things are built in us, fundamental level. If you're telling me that, yes, I want to be free, fair enough. And I've already made the point that if you're spending 40 hours or more doing something that you have no control over for a reason that doesn't really exist, meaning there's no social reason for it, that's not free. That's the opposite of free. Now the question to you is, how do you get to a point where you can be free? You have needs. Those needs in some way will have to be met if you are to be free. Now, the point I make is, if you're stuck in a particular ideology, yeah, you can never solve that. You can never square that circle. But if you look at it from a place of realism and just a place of, all right, how do we create a society where people are free? Meaning, it's not a capitalistic society in the sense of my freedom is determined by how much money I have. Well, half of the country is literally in debt or poverty. You can't be free if you don't have capital in a capitalistic society. Whether it's state ownership or private ownership, it's still the situation of some higher order bearing down on the individual. I don't like it when government does it. I don't like it when private enterprise does it. I want to be left to my own devices. How do you get that in a society? Now, understand, there's another point. You can't take this argument of, well, I don't care what happens to anybody else, because ultimately, those people are going to come for you if you're doing something where you're profiting immensely, and they aren't. So even if you say, well, yeah, I got mine, screw them. Depending on how bad society gets, those people are coming for you. You're going to have a mob. Those people are going to be pissed. Those people are not going to descend into chaos without trying to get something to take care of themselves with. What I mean is, people will violate laws if it's survival. If their survival is at stake, those laws are meaningless. The society that we have now, many of the social ills that we're dealing with, is coming from a situation where the majority of the people are poor, are broke, are barely making ends meet, are put in one stressful situation after the next, not because they did anything wrong, just by virtue of the model to which they exist. That's not just in the United States, that's all over the world. The United States may be particularly bad, but yes, it's all over the world. How do you get beyond that? Meaning, the only way I can be safe, the only way I can actually be safe, is that everybody else is also relatively safe or relatively taken care of. Their comfort or their security in some degree is my security. If I'm living in immense excess, then yeah, I'm going to be a target. I'm going to have something that those people are going to need, and I am going to be an object of scorn by those people. Now, what I'm getting at is, if we're talking about freedom, we're talking about it for pretty much everybody. There's no situation where you're going to be free, you're going to subjugate a bunch of other people, and you're not necessarily going to be in threat. You are in threat because of what you're doing. If those people get loose, those people are coming after you. If you're looking for freedom and you're looking for security, you have to deal with that. Meaning you have to deal with it from the standpoint of everybody. Even though, yes, we're talking about the individual, ultimately we also are talking about the collective. It's somewhat of a paradox. You deal with one, you have to deal with all, because that all is going to affect that one. And let's take it to the next step. How do we get our needs met? If we're saying, well, he's a freedom extremist. Yes, there are some jobs he's recognized as being socially necessary, meaning these things need to take place, otherwise we're either going to die of starvation, die of hunger, die of some kind of ecological damage. Now, one of the main issues that we have issues with in the capitalistic model is automation, disruptive technologies. So you have a situation where the jobs bleed away. Now, the principle of the model itself is to maximize profit. That's the point of the model. That's the point, essentially, that's the profit motive. That's the incentive structure. Maximize profit. The more profit you have, the more success that's accrued to you. You don't even have to have done anything. You don't even have to be that bright. It could be a stupid human trick. But by virtue of you having the capital, the model says that you have something to say that's important and people should pay attention to you as being successful. It's an amazing thing. There's no reality to it at all. And yet the model dictates its own subordinate reality to the people who are in it. In that particular situation, the model has an incentive to continue to maximize profit. Meaning if a technology comes out, a few things can happen, but one of the main things, either I can fire this worker now, and because I can fire this worker, I can put it in a robot, and I can accrue all of the profit. That robot is going to put out just as much, if not more, than that particular worker. I don't have to worry about sick days. I don't have to worry about him going on vacation. Don't have to worry about him having a baby or his wife having a kid. None of those things. That robot can be there every day and essentially do the exact same task. You've accrued the profit associated with that robot, and you didn't have to pay for the salary for that guy. But think about the next step, though. That guy is now out of a job. That guy can't afford your particular product. Yes, you have a robot there, but that robot is not doing anything. That robot is just doing that particular task. That robot is not buying your products from you. Now, same thing with shipping a job overseas. Same idea. Paying this person less, shipping money to the top. Now, you already are under stress in the sense of your job market. You don't have enough jobs for the number of people you have in the country. Many of the jobs that you have are low-wage jobs at this point because, again, people were fleeing the country because they could get that stuff done in a cheaper place, leaving many service jobs, Walmart, McDonald's, Kmart, whatever, etc. Taxi drivers are about to take a hit. Delivery drivers are about to take a hit. You have self-driving cars that can essentially be on the road, point A to point B. Is Uber going to really continue to hire people to drive those cars? And would it get to the point where that car is safer, the computer is safer driving the car than you? Meaning, our laws going to be passed where you're not the driver of that particular car. What I'm getting at is, in the same way that one technology after the other makes your labor less valuable, or at the very least, not as necessary, in the capitalistic model, that's a problem. In capitalism, the work is not necessarily done for social value. The work is done for market value. Everything else is subordinate to the acquisition of profit. I'm not doing this because somebody needs this. I'm doing this because I'm going to advertise to them to get them to buy this. There's a difference between those things. It's not like you're farming for food. It's not like you're building something that's massive and awesome. That's not it. A plush teddy bear is just a plush teddy bear. A Tickle Me Elmo is not there because you need a Tickle Me Elmo. It's one thing after another. When you're at the supermarket and you see those little trinkets, those things aren't there because you need those things. Those things are there because somebody figured they can make a buck off of them. That's different. So if a technology comes out, those jobs are purely just for the sake of those people having jobs. There's no social value, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to debase the job. I'm just trying to make this point of many of those people are working not because they need to work, but only because they need to make a living. The model itself compels that person to take on a certain task. Whether the task is necessary or not in regards to society is irrelevant under the capitalistic model. That person is working just because that person is working. In a disruptive technologies model, or in the realism model, or the one I'm talking about being a freedom extremist, those technologies should be used to decrease the amount of labor that an individual will have to take on. Meaning, the only way you can be free is if you are untethered to the work and to everything else, meaning you have freedom to do whatever you want without having to worry about food, clothing, shelter. Now the question is, do we have the technology as a society, for the most part, to automate one service, one industry, one thing after the other to minimize the labor that humanity has to put into it? Yes. Yes, you can do that. So, right off the bat, I am literally talking about putting in policy that goes with this idea of allowing people to be free. You live your life the way you want to live your life. You get up in the morning, you do what you want to do, not because you need to eat, because that food is for the most part provided for you just by the society coming up with systems that can cover those things, those basic survival needs. Money becomes almost irrelevant. Debt, poverty, all those things, for the most part, go away. They become almost irrelevant. Everybody in society has everything that they need. The society is geared around allowing people to become self-actualized. You're free. You're free. You're not bound by any limits of capital or anything else. That society comes together and says, we're going to build systems to automate these processes. So when people need something, those people can get those things free of charge. Yes, there's still labor in that society. And there's still a situation where you would have to come up with some equitable way to meet labor. But do you see a major difference between maybe retiring at the age of 30 as opposed to retiring at the age of 60? If you have a society where you're focusing on using the technology itself to make that society better and make lives easier for the people of that particular society, then you've made life easier for the people of that particular society. You're talking about eliminating crime, poverty. You're talking about all these things, all these social ills, washing away. As a conservative, are you telling me you don't like this idea of, for the most part, being able to get up in the morning and doing whatever you want because you know that your basic needs are met? You're following your passion, wherever that passion leads. Again, up to the point where you're adversely affecting somebody else, but you are following that passion. If you want to be a restaurant chef, have at it. Have at it. If no one comes to your restaurant, so what? You're still going to eat. You're still going to have a shelter. You're still going to have a roof over your head. You're still going to have your medication. All those things. You want to be a doctor, have at it. You're practicing medicine because you love that medicine. I am not even picky on the model that the society will use to kind of push people or prod people into these particular industries. I just care more so about, yes, this allows each person in that society to be free. They have what they need. The society is not utopian. There is no such thing as utopia. The society, or the ideal society, is an equation. It's not a flat value. So based upon the technology or the technological level of a particular society, or let me say it this way, the idealness of a society is proportional to the technology of that particular society. Your social changes, or your social needs, that social natural order that I keep mentioning, food, clothing, shelter, the sense of fulfillment, the sense of doing something that allows you to be self-actualized as a person. Your needs are met intellectually and physically. That's the point of life, at least to me. And when I'm making this point of being a freedom extremist, it's how do you construct society in a way that would allow each and every individual to be free. You can't tell me that this society is indicative of freedom. Even if you're a right-winger, most of the country is poor, meaning the majority of Republicans are poor. You're constrained by the capital in this particular system. Now, yes, I don't want government breathing down my neck. I don't want private enterprise breathing down my neck. And all things being equal, I don't want to be constrained by some arbitrary value. If I want to live somewhere, if I want to go somewhere, if I want to take a flight, a trip, if I want to indulge myself in some kind of art, some new project, some weird event, if I want to go to Mexico or somewhere and look for UFOs, I would like to pursue my life the way I want to pursue my life. Why wouldn't you want to do the same? Now, the question becomes, is it possible? And the answer is yeah. You can look at the very act that there's a word called disruptive technologies tells you those technologies, for the most part, are producing more than what we need. China, by itself, could literally produce everything that the world needs. Meaning, we're working just for the sake of work. We're not doing it because we need it. We're only doing it because the model itself forces people to get a job in order to get a roof over their heads and put foods in their bellies. I'm saying that model is ridiculous and worthless. If you have a situation where you can meet your needs, your survival needs, without necessarily having to get up every morning and make yourself subordinate to something else, why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that? That just seems like a more ideal society. It seems like a society that's, honestly, just fucking awesome. It really does. Think of it this way. Think of the number of people we have in our prisons. Can you really be called a land of the free with more people in our prisons? I think 3 times more than China. And China has 3 times our population. If you want freedom, you have to at the very least be aware of the concessions that you make to get whatever particular society you want. You can have a capitalistic society. You just have to deal with all the social ills and everything else that come with it. I am making this point that it is far more right-wing, far more libertarian, to come up with an actual plan of, yes, I want to be free, but I'm also aware of certain realities, meaning other people will have to be in a particular situation where they're not trying to kill me because I have something that they don't particularly have. I need to make sure my needs are met. Do we have the technology as a collective to make sure our needs are met? Yes. Yes. Those things can be done. Those things just are systems. You build those particular systems and you construct your society in a way that allow those people to be self-actualized. Right off the bat, you see the problem though. That model of society, even though it allows everybody in that society to be free, by virtue that there are some people with $50 billion in this particular model, and there are other people sleeping on the street. The guy with the $50 billion has no interest in an equitable society in that way. From his relative perspective, he loses power. Mind you, the power that he accrues in this particular model is illusion. It's complete illusion. And yet it's illusion that everybody functions under. So it makes it, in this subordinate reality in this case, real. But that doesn't exist outside the model. And the model I'm talking about, this realistic or pragmatic freedom model, he loses power in that model. Yes, he's free, just like everybody else. He can do pretty much whatever he wants. He can go wherever he wants. That's still fair game. But ultimately, what he had before was control of others. Well, yeah, that's not freedom. If you're trying to have some situation where you're trying to subvert the will of other people, then yeah, that's a fail in the model that I come up with. In a capitalist model, that's perfectly okay. In my model, it's not. I call myself a freedom extremist for a reason. Leave me to my devices. I don't want anybody hovering over me. I don't want anybody telling me what to do. I don't want anybody trying to prod me or tell me what to think. We should get together, make sure our needs are met. All of our needs are met. And let people be left to their own devices. Let them do what they want. If you have a bunch of people who want to collectivize for whatever reason, have at it. You can do whatever you want. What I'm getting at is allowing people the freedom to do what they want without being constrained by these imaginary entanglements that don't exist and just make life more difficult. Hey, you understand, we don't have an issue of scarcity, right? Like, it's not a situation where there's not enough to feed everybody or to clothe or to put shelter over everyone or to medical care for everyone. We don't have that. That's not our issue. Our issue is the model itself that allows scarcity. It allows it to persist. It does so perfectly okay, saying, well, if those people wanted health care, if those people wanted food, then they should have been more meritorious in going to school and coming up with a solution in order to get it. Or they should have started a business. Or they should have asked their mom for $20,000 to start a business. It's just crazy stuff. No. Those people aren't wrong for whatever they're doing. And by virtue of their birth, by virtue of them existing, yes, they should be okay, particularly if we have the resources on this planet to take care of those people. We should take care of each other. We should take care of each other. It's not welfare. It's everybody having common sense enough to realize Let's make sure our needs are met and pursue our own ends. Yes, I'm a freedom extremist. I'm a freedom extremist. And at that point, government, under my model, is tiny and barely exists. It's there only in the sense of making sure those structures stay intact. It was almost like government creates the railroads. Fair enough. If there's some crisis, yes, you can have some situation like that. But ultimately, government leaves you to your own devices in that particular model. So, alright guys, if you enjoyed the content, feel free to write, feel free to share and subscribe.